Huego, Nagignawa, Ross Montour. This is Tetewathá, the Partyline Talkshow, K103.7 on your. Did I still say dial? I don't know. But anyways, I'm a little rusty here, so I've been away for a while. But I just couldn't stay away. I mean, there's a lot of things happening right now in the community on a political level. And it seems like so many things are coalescing all at the same time. And we just had a recent court decision. I'll be talking with the Grand Chief about that right now. But first of all, I'd like to welcome to the studio Gina Deer, Chief Gina Deer, and I guess what we could talk about with you is the stuff that in the last week has been out there, which is gaming. We had the gaming meeting, and that's obviously something that's contributed a lot of controversy in the community. I understood it was well. I wanted to go, but I got snagged up in running people back and forth here and there. It seemed like at that hour, but I understood it was fairly well attended.
Yes, there was close to 100 people, and there was some very good input from them. The proponents were there to give a presentation on exactly what their project was and inform the community that, they were making efforts to employ people by way of a job fair and working with Tetewathá Zakta. And I believe May 17th will be the first one. So, yeah, the community had an opportunity to question the proponents as well as MCK, and we also had Mark Jocks from the Gaming Commission in attendance, so everybody was there to answer questions, and, some of the people had questions about the definition of casino.
Well, I mean, you've consistently said that this is not a casino based on... It's only electronic gaming devices.
Right.
And it isn't a full-blown casino.
Yes.
But there at the meeting, we had Stan Mayo, who was with the poker club on the 132. And his view is a little bit different. I mean, it's like, if you want to look at it that way, even Kaja Sport is a casino because they have gaming devices.
Right. So... I got in touch with the North American state and provincial lotteries because after looking and researching some of the terms casino other than Webster's Dictionary, if you look at the regulating bodies out there, they all have a different definition. So when I reached out to this North American agency, they had said to me, every territory has their own version of what a casino is, and whatever the gaming regulations are, it needs to be defined. And I agree that, here in Kahnawà, we need to define that term casino. I did speak with Mark Jocks on that, and he did some research of his own, and he said he was looking in the U.S. and at definitions, and none of them are the same. Every jurisdiction has their own definition of what a casino is. So that is something that needs to be clarified here in Kahnawà. We will be doing that, working on that. One of the other issues that stood out was the lack of consultation. Mm-hmm. And we are currently doing some work on, doing an evaluation of what needs consultation at what level. Because this project is something that wasn't permanent. It's a pilot project that runs for 3 years. The establishments were already there, so the impact to community was not going to be great. It was like adding on a gaming activity to what is already there. So some of these things were taken into consideration, and then again, the kiosk that I had set up only had one person that had sat down with the four of us who were there. There was myself, Joe Dallaronde, Carly One, Marquis, and Paul Rice. So we all sat. There was three of us at each time, speaking with different people, and everybody was for gaming. Some wanted to talk about gaming and cannabis, but it was specifically just to gaming that day, and it was like an open dialogue. What did you want to talk about? You know what's going on. We had put out the press releases around the electronic gaming devices and what we were looking to do. There was, newscasts about Mohawk online and the things that were happening. And then there's the talk of the casino. Mm-hmm. So we kind of left it up to the public to say, what would you like to discuss? And we had, all the subjects discussed at length. So we went ahead, with this pilot project. When we get the results, we're going to have to go back to community and see what, the impacts really are. Mm-hmm. But again, we're at MCK looking at a system that you'll have criteria for consultation. And this way there will be a formalized process. And I think the community will be very happy to see that, because it'll be simple to see if this fits a full-blown consultation. What types of consultation do we need? Because as we know, some of them can be very costly. Mm-hmm. We have the Kahnawà CDMP, community decision-making process, and the attendance is very, very low. So when we want to consult with people, we have a forum there that, we could utilize, but people are not. So when we did the cannabis survey, it's almost like we had to go and draw them out, and try and find different ways to reach out to people, because just opening the doors is not good enough. We had to go and knock on those doors or call those numbers and do what we can to reach, our community members. So people say they want consultation, but when CDMP he got, low attendance, it's like...
Well, one of the things, when you talk about the cannabis thing, or even if you talk about the casino thing, is you will find, if you have a meeting, like there have been meetings, and then you'll find that there's a lot of dissent about what, the process should have been. This law should have gone, that we offered should have gone through the community decision-making thing, that what the council is doing is really silencing the voice of the people, are just going to do what they want to do anyways. And you've heard that. Listen, let's do me a favor here. I need to take a break right now and do a little business here as soon as I can get the attention here. And you're listening to Tetewathá, K103's Partyline Talkshow. My guest for this part of the hour is Chief Gina Deer. Tokwiro, we'll be right back with more of the Partyline. And welcome back to Tetewathá. Ross Montour, and my guest for the hour on the Partyline Talk Show. It's MCK Friday, and my guest is Chief Gina Deer for the first half. Coming up after this half of the hour will be the Grand Chief Joe Norton will be in, and we're going to be talking about, obviously, we're going to talk about that settlement. But anyways, back to where we kind of left off there abruptly, really, is the dissent usually doesn't appear in those places. It appears in social media. It appears at specific kinds of meetings, like the cannabis meeting that took place a couple of months back, 3 months or so, and that was all about, this is even with the state of things about taxation, it's about this, it's about that, and I'm just wondering at the last meeting how much of that was in evidence.
Well, there was, I think, really constructive questions, and there was some constructive criticism, It's become difficult gauging, like I said, the consultation level that we need to do. And that's why I'm glad at MCK they're building some sort of criteria. So then when we come up with these subjects, then it'll fit into a certain category and we'll know what level of consultation to do. I personally would like to see a full-blown consultation office. Mm-hmm. I know there is one that is in Pembroke, and it's, specifically there for consultation. And for us, we need that, because when we don't do enough consultation, people get upset. But when you're trying to do consultation, people aren't participating. Right. So it becomes very difficult. But if we have a mechanism in place that is efficient, people are accustomed to using it, I think that it'll be more helpful in the future, and people will be more willing to participate.
I want to go just so, because we're talking about two things here, and one of them obviously we're just talking about things like cannabis, but in terms of the 3-year pilot project with the poker clubs having electronic gaming devices, at this point now, does council see that as we're going ahead now?
Yes, yes, we are.
So
there's an agreement that was developed between the two poker houses. They're two separate agreements with council. As we had stated, there will be monies that come back to the community. These monies are $1 million per establishment minimum. The more money they make, the more money the community will make. That's part of the agreement.
Is that $1 million a year?
Yes.
Yeah, $1 million a year for 3 years.
For 3
so really,
years.
we're talking about a total of $6 million,
Exactly.
3 from each of the two establishments.
Yes. Yeah. So gaming has been in Kahnawà for a very, very long time. There's been a lot of discussion on, regulating more of the activities, especially since the Chase the Ace has developed and seems to be flourishing. So a lot of people are asking, about this and other activities like pull tabs. Mm-hmm. You look at the number of pull tabs, that are going on in stores, in local establishments, the local clubs. So there's a lot of that going on, and none of that revenue comes back to community. So here, council has been looking at different opportunities for revenue generation. And again, we have two established community poker houses that wanted to add this activity. When they came to council, they had a pretty comprehensive business plan and offer. There have been other people who have come in the past, giving their pitch on it, but it hasn't been a very complete project. So we had the working group that was developed, and we've come to this agreement. So now that we're moving forward, there's been a lot of questioning in the community about the dollars. The decision, where those dollars are going to go is yet to be determined, but it needs to be something that is tangible and community can see. So,
go ahead, carry on.
So these things are part of one of the priorities of council, which was revenue generation. And it has met the criteria to the things that council has wanted to do with public and private partnerships. We're hoping to do more. Doesn't necessarily mean on gaming.
But what I read in Ietsénhaienhs this week that that in fact the statement was made that the monies that would be coming would be looking at very specific kinds of funding that have either not been funded, language and sports and rec as two particular things. And so that does seem very specific. Well,
these are the areas they're looking at where we're going to exactly put it. I guess that's up to finance to decide, where those needs are. For myself, there's a whole spectrum of needs out there, from education to sports and rec to, the health. We have a lot of issues right now that are not being funded.
Okay. I got a question from a community member. Is the money going straight back to the community members or MCK to distribute to organizations? May seem redundant, but...
Yeah. Again, it's not going directly to community members as individuals, but it is going to community and, again, underfunded or non-funded needs out there.
Okay. On the issue, the thing that keeps coming back to haunt me, because I've been at the meetings, the issue about, is it a tax? Is it a tax? Why isn't it a tax?
Because it's an agreement. It's not a taxation system. We don't have a taxation system here. It's not being imposed upon them. It's something that they've come to council and made an offer, and we've made an agreement around.
Okay. So give us a start date.
We do not have a start date. Okay. That's something they have to work out with the Kahnawà Gaming Commission. Yeah. I know there's a pre-licensing that they have to go through right now in order to just meet with suppliers for the machines and any other needs to set up the establishments. Once they get through the pre-licensing, then they get an actual license if they pass all the due diligence, and all the companies that they're involved with also have to pass due diligence.
All right. Well, listen, Gina, I want to thank you for coming. We haven't even got to some of the more controversial questions about the cannabis thing, which we will talk about at some point before
Sure.
and likely after elections. And see, you are running again, I presume. We'll know on nomination day.
Yes.
Anyways, thank you for coming in, Gina.
All right.
And welcome back to Tetewathá. I'm Ross Montour. And I'm filling in for Luann today. It's MCK Friday, and I was itching to get back in the seat. And what better time to do that than a couple of days after the coming down of the decision on the Winnie Horn Miller decision. To that end, I want to welcome the Grand Chief Joe Tokwiro Norton to the program. Hi, Joe.
Good afternoon.
So, did the earth move? Are we recovering?
Well, you know, it's interesting. By now, most people have heard a lot of the different, angles on this particular matter and this particular issue. So, for me, I had said all along, you know, and I never hid the fact that I didn't have any faith in the court, or let's put it this way, I kind of figured the court would decide certain things that would be against us, you know. And I said this publicly before, and I never hid that fact. And it's you might as well say we were dragged into court kicking and screaming, you know. I didn't necessarily want to go into court. I've been down that path before on this matter, and at every turn we lost, you know. Somebody dragged us into court. They sued us, or we went to the Human Rights Tribunal, you know, and it turned out somewhat negative, but everything else remained intact, though, and that's the way I'm looking at it. You know, going back 30 years ago, when the first court case was heard on this particular issue, in one shape or way or form, the judges or the judgment always did not. Excluded a decision that non-Native people could live in the community. And I think that's one of the most important elements of this particular decision that came down. And one of the things that the judge did say, and I hope a lot of people had the opportunity to read the judgment itself, because you can find it online, is the fact that this is something that Kahnawà has a lot of work to do to resolve themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and that's so. When having said that, you turn your attention internally over here, and you say, everybody, you know, get off your duff, get to these meetings, sit down, find out what it's all about, get involved, and let's come to conclusions, or conclusions for this time period, because 30 years down the road, the situation would be somewhat different. It's not going to stay the same all the time. But at the very least, let's give the basic solid foundation for our future generations.
One of the things, Joe, the thing that I got from reading, and I did have my first cursory reading of the document, in relation to that aspect of choosing not to render a decision in regard to the non-Native spouses being able to automatically just move into the community. He did seem to indicate some things which to me would suggest that things coming down the road, if Kahnawà didn't, in its residency law, accommodate for those non-natives, that it could potentially come back to bite us in the future.
Well, anything can. There's no question about it, but we do have to prepare ourselves, and we have a good basis for that at this point in time, that there was no judgment on that. And you have to separate the membership issue and who is and who isn't, with who can reside on the territory. You know, the residency part and the membership part, two different things in a sense, in that, you know, you identify who can live, who is a member, who is part of, and then you turn around and you say, all right, who can live here then? And if it's going to be exclusively just Mohawks and other Oklahoma nations, then that's clear. If it's going to be a combination of several things, then that's what you make clear. I mean, in the past, we always had non-native people living here. We still do today, but in the past we've had that. I know as a child, I remember growing up here,
Yeah.
you know, and playing hockey with people who were French. You know, my neighbors were French. And
We
whatever else.
had the same where we lived. Yeah.
So I mean, that's and you know, they were allowed to stay here for whatever reason, and then they left. It wasn't a big issue, as far as I could see. And historically, from what I understood, there was people who were living here who were considered to be non-Oglehumwe,
Yeah.
non-Kahnawake, you know. So they were here, and they were. But as time has gone on, and the government now is moving towards, you know, implementing and pushing Bill S3, which is another piece of work that we have to be concerned about. So all the more reason why we have to solidify our membership law in order to prevent perhaps anywhere between 17,000 to 35,000 future Mohawks, you know. So we have to be aware of that. That's the figures that have come out.
Yeah, one of the things in the judgment that I took note of was one of the problems that we had right now is we didn't really have a judicial component in the community for people to address these types of things, concerns and I was somebody when I ran for council last election. So one of the things that really bothered me is that we have laws that are ahead of our capacity to deal with them and offer resolution solutions for people. And so in there, it does seem to suggest that if you have a judiciary body and you have a charter to protecting people's rights, and that there is a court of redress, then maybe they don't have a place or a part to play in that.
Well, it can get confusing and complicated at times, but if you try to put it in its proper context, we need to do some, and I'm going to call them interim measures, and even a justice system, a judicial system that will deal with that, is as far as I can see, is an interim measure until you have a traditional system that kicks in and begins to sort out all of this in terms of depoliticizing it, you know, and putting it into its proper context in terms of clans selection and all that sort of thing. But in the interim, until that happens, you've got to have something in place. Otherwise, you're vulnerable to the laws of Canada. You're vulnerable to the Charter. You're vulnerable to Native people or non-Native people saying, well, you know, we're a part of this now. We want to be a part of this. We can be a part of this. And you look at long term. And some people may say, well, it's only a handful of people. But long term, you keep this thinking that it's not harmful right now. Way down the road there, you're going to be leaving a legacy.
But it's not really that far down the road.
No, that's why I used it.
Yeah.
I said 30 years, maybe even quicker than that. You know?
Well, yeah. It was one of our former friends there, the chief of the Mikanak group. Apparently has a Ganassadage registry number.
They're here now. I mean,
it's here. And the people there are reeling over that.
Yeah.
And of course they look and say, well, how could the Band Council allow this?
Yeah.
And sort of tried to point out to people, well, it's just got nothing to do with the bands anymore. Unfortunately, even in this judgment, the judge said that the Mohawk Council had not gone through the request process for taking over membership for themselves, which is fraud. You know, I mean, we know where we're going with the government.
Yeah, well, that's an issue. We made a conscientious decision back in 1981 not to ask the government of Canada to recognize what we're doing, or more specifically the Department of Indian Affairs. We didn't ask them. We just sent them whatever we had at that time, the moratorium on mixed marriages, and we said, this is the law now in Kahnawake. So since then, we've battled over that on an ongoing, continuous basis. And Canada, since then, has changed the Indian Act, has amended the Indian Act, to reflect the decisions that were made back then, court cases up until the Deschanel decision, and then S3 coming in. So they've gradually built up the legislation in order for them to enforce what they feel is to do away with the discriminatory parts of the Indian Act. And what we've done in turn is we've said no. We've even stood more firm on that.
You're listening to K103's Tetewathá and Partyline Talkshow. Ross Montour, and I'm speaking with Grand Chief Joe Tokwiro Norton. We're going to try and go to a little bit of a break here and get into that in a second. Sitting here, I can figure out how to do this. This board has changed since I've been here last, and we're just going to muddle through that. But anyways, Joe, go ahead. Yeah, so... It's so awkward. It's so awkward. One of the things that to me that really kind of strikes me is because those things are happening. You have that legislation happening on the backside. You have you had C31. Let's go to C31, and then you had Sharon McIver, and now you had Deschanel. In each of those cases, it's been purported that those things resolved issues of discrimination, but in fact, they didn't really. What they did is made life more complicated for people. And one of the things that I did take note of was reading Gerald Alfred's statements on there was that, you look at it and say, well, once upon a time in the 17th, 18th century, we did this and whatever. Well, maybe it changed. Yes, whatever. But the one thing that should have been consistent all the way through that, it was our decision to decide who we accept among us. Yeah. And it was never the part of the government. And one of the things the questions comes up is, what gave them the right? Yep. What gave them the right to make all of these decisions? Was it the British North America Act? Was it the Papal Bulls of 1493? Was it the Doctrine and Discovery? What is it that gives them the right?
All of that. All of the above says that, we are subhuman in a sense, so that they have to tell us, who we are, what we are, and who can reside amongst us. I mean, it's no secret that they studied, more specifically, the Iroquois people, and looked at it that we're a matriarchal system. So how do we change that around? So we bring in the patriarchal system, and we make it, we change it so that if a Native woman, a Mohawk woman, or a Seneca woman, or whoever marries a white man, then she's gone. Her children are gone. So what we've done basically is we said, no, we're going to bring a halt to that in terms of saying that the two parties, the male and female, male Ogunhue, female Ogunhue, if they marry non-native people, then this is the consequences of that. Now, some people are saying that's a harsh approach to take, but how else does one begin to deal with the circumstances when you have a government that's changing its laws so quickly?
Well, yeah.
Over time, that says, it does. They don't come out and say it directly, but there is inference there that at some point in time, those non-native people will be a part of your community.
Yeah.
You have to accept them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if I go back to say 1980, 1981, yeah. And the discussions that were there, I mean, people, how come the people who had acquired status could continue to have? And at the time, and there was discussion about whether it was going to be compassionate to allow them to say, but the government said that you can't remove any of those people. They won't remove them, those people that had acquired status by marriage. And so ultimately, that comes out in this decision also in terms of the discrimination aspect. Well, there are people living here right now who are non-natives, and of course we don't talk about those people who, and it's not whether they're nice people or not nice people, it's about whether we have a right to decide, and the government says no.
I mean, looking back, I was around in those days,
obviously
80, 81, when we decided we were going to do this. It's one thing to be talking about it verbally in the community, looking at it from a traditional, cultural point of view, and saying this is the way things should be, or this is the way we want to change things. When you put it on paper and you put it out there, then it becomes a target, So it changes the whole face of the discussions. And what was happening back in 80, 81 is no different to what's happening now. The reason 1981 was chosen as a time period in which to bring an end to the mixed marriage situation and hence the moratorium and the non-interference with those existing here prior to 81, non-natives, because you got to start somewhere unless you want to go back, and remove all non-native people that are here, those married, and those who had status now with the government, because it's two different things that we have here. Membership is one thing, that's the government of Canada issued, and then you have Kahnawà people, then that's a different set of circumstances.
The basis of the criteria is it isn't really, when I look at it, it's not really that it was 1981 and what happened before, because as anybody who has any understanding about what our history is, in the 17th and 18th century, even before that, people that we decided to bring in and incorporate into our communities, and so was our right to decide, and that's a thing that's been lost along the way. So if we said that those people prior to 1981, if it was our decision to make, to say, well, you know what, we're going to take a compassionate position there, but it's our right, it's our decision to make. It is not the decision of the government. But how do we? Like my first interest to say to the government is like, we're independent of you. And
this is something. Even this past week, I was at the special chiefs meeting at the Assembly of First Nations in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the minister of Native Affairs, Indian Affairs, Carolyn Bennett, was up there saying, we were told that we should get out of the Indian business. She says, and that's what we're going to do. But the more they say that, the more they get involved in it, and it's further strengthened, if you want to call it that, by these court cases. So what is the government going to do now? And Deschenaux was the same thing. Deschenaux brought on S3. They were forced, they had to go, they had to change the laws, and they had to go and change the Indian Act and further, eliminate these, the discriminatory parts, but then add 2 more generations, to those who are eligible.
Yeah.
Hence the numbers that come up now between 750,000 and 1.2 million over the next X number of years, which is a scary, bloody thing to look at. As it is right now, we're almost getting equal between the numbers that we have on our KKR list and what the government of Canada has in Ottawa on the membership list there, the federal list. The numbers are balancing it. We're up to 11,000 people now.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the way, those in Ottawa who are being registered are going to overtake the numbers that we have here. And then they're going to argue, and then you throw in S3. That's further going to increase that as time goes on. So we got to darn well, stick to the trenches and hold our ground.
So, in the amendment process, there was no commitment to say returning to the Elders Council on membership, but that the judge mentions that as being needing to start as soon as possible.
That has been a debatable issue at the council table. I, for one, said, when are we going to start in reinstating and instating our people? I said, because we got a whole bunch of people sitting there waiting to do this. That's why you had certain people who were suing us, who were being denied, reinstatement or instatement, whatever the case may be, only because we had no Council of Elders. Council of Elders or not, we got to start doing this, and people in the community have to realize we have to do it. A scrutin system, scrutinize people. The whole process can be done very quickly through our registrar. You don't have to bring back a whole council of elders to do that.
Well, in fact, the law, the way it was passed, is, well, for great-grandparents, meant you were on.
You now have the criteria for it.
Yeah.
You don't have to debate this on and on again. It's the registrar. If she needs to consult with people, then that's fine. This can be done, though, and should be done as quickly as possible. I'm for that. I want to promote that. And it's not necessarily because the court only highlighted what we needed to do. Okay? So let's get going.
Yeah. Did it highlight what we need to do from our perspective, or what we needed to do by their perspective?
No, by ours.
That's the question.
That's the way I'm looking at that.
Well, that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. Because the one thing that hasn't changed, as you say, or anybody knows, is that the sentiment isn't going to change.
No.
Within the community until people decide that they want to change at any given point in time.
The headlines were the law on what was the headlines? Marry out, get out. Are considered unconstitutional. They're struck down by the courts, and the whole law, Mohawk law, is on that, is no longer valid. Well, if you then begin to peel the onion, you find out that a lot of what we have in there is by the judge. He looked at it and said basically, well, it's what they're doing is you have to keep doing that. He did not say we didn't have a right to do that. Yeah,
he was struck down 21 and 22.
Yeah. He took two particular components of the law and said, all right, these two I'm saying are not constitutional.
They're not constitutional
but
as far as Canada's constitution.
I encourage you to continue to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you should do it, you got to do it internally too.
But let me ask you, is it 21 and 22 is unconstitutional as far as Canada's constitution and human rights is? Does that have to be ours?
No, we can find a convenient way. As a matter of fact, those two sections, as they were written to this day, were inoperable anyway. Okay, and they were being looked at. Mm-hmm. So it's not something like a revelation here that there was like the court is ordering us to do this. We were already in the process of doing that. We were going back to the table for rediscussions with the community through the CDMP process.
Now, do you see that process, which has been going on now for over 10 years, speeding up now? You think the impetus is going to be there?
It's the CDMP process has always been ongoing.
But on membership, so
well, the people have to understand that we've got to do something ourselves now to make it much clearer exactly what we mean in those two particular sectors. So we have to do it.
So that's
for the betterment of our situation. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Not because a court said so. Maybe we look at it that the court highlighted what we already knew and what we're in the process of doing anyway. That brought it to the surface. And then you've got the other part of this is people being compensated for whatever the case may be. And it's if you read the judgment, he looked at it and said basically it's minimal. 35,000 is compared to 800,000. One individual gets 25,000 for services or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Lack of service. But even that is questionable. We're looking at that in terms of...
Do you think, is Mohawk Council going to appeal any of that?
I'm not sure yet. We haven't gotten into any detail in terms of whether or not there's going to be any appeal to any part of it. It was only we've had one major discussion. We're going to have several others. We have some time to look at it quickly, and whatever else.
The last thing on the judgment has to do with the legal fees. Here, I'll find out how it's worded exactly.
We had a discussion on that yesterday.
The whole with judicial costs. What does that exactly mean?
Well, whatever, I don't really know. I'm not a lawyer. All I know is our lawyers have advised us that it's probably going to be minimal.
So the council is responsible. The Kahnawà is responsible for that.
Yeah.
What about the lawyers' fees?
No. Not responsible for that.
So that's whatever agreement they arranged
Yeah.
with the legal firm is what that is. Because it was, I think, discussed on an interview with Winnie.
Well, that brings on the aspect that I'm assuming there was a shared cost here amongst the 16 that, to pay for the legal services, and thinking that they were going to win, that they had a good chance about winning their case, and they haven't. They lost. So some people jumped in there purely for money issues,
Yeah.
And one day I'd like to throw out the names of some of these people.
Well, if you read the judgment, you kind of figure you can make some.
Yeah, you look at it,
that
and there were. He said basically, there's nothing here for you.
Yeah. Anyways, listen, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been a while since we talked.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a few more appearances before the election season kicks in. But this is apparently going to be a big part of the whole election process. Is you got the gaming thing that's going on, you have the cannabis thing going on, and this membership thing. S3, a huge impact potential.
And I'm up to it.
All right, sir. That's our program. The news. What's coming up next is the news with Paul Grafe, and then 1 o'clock jump with Susie Delaront. Don't go away. We'll see you next time you see me. Onigiwahi.
Ona.